Hello and welcome to this special webinar and broadcast here on CNBC Africa. My name is Godfrey Mutizwa. The topic of discussion today is business resilience during uncertain times. Before we get started, let's take a look at this.
Not many things in business is certain. With emerging challenges, organizations have truly entered into a new age of uncertainty. This has been a catalyst for business to move towards technological solutions to build business resilience. Resilience in the face of adversity is crucial, and a key part of resilience is foresight. Executives need the capabilities and systems to look ahead and predict future disruption, helping them to adapt accordingly. CEOs are responsible for leading organizations in leveraging technology to continuously innovate, improve, and optimize business processes. Stay tuned as the panel give their insights and unpack the tools and resources for business resiliency, how they are preparing for the future, and effectively navigating these unprecedented times.
Thank you, Jill. Now, arguably, actually, the global economy hasn't seen a shock as severe as the coronavirus since the end of the Second World War. A quick check of the bill so far. We are talking about an estimated 5% contraction of the global economy this year, which would be the deepest recession since the Second World War, with the largest fraction of economies experiencing declines in per capita incomes in 150 years, or since 1870. Global trade, tourism, commodity exports and markets and external financing have been disrupted, as well as schooling and primary health care. And I could go on. So today we are focusing on what the primary actors in this crisis ought to be doing. How do companies or states respond? How do they reposition? How do they become future ready? My panel of eminent experts in their fields are here, and here they are. Andrew Sutherland, Senior Vice President, Business Development, Oracle, Europe, Middle East and Africa. Dr. Patrick Njoroge, Governor, Central Bank of Kenya. Anit Sako, Regional Director, Oracle, West Africa. Carl Saki, Deputy General Manager, GCNet and President, Isaka, Ghana. Jibril Ouattara, Chief Executive Officer, MTN, Côte d'Ivoire. So here they are, and here are the issues that we think ought to be covered, and we will be trying to provide some of the answers and questions over the next 40 or 50 minutes or so of this program. And I want to start with Governor Njoroge. By the way, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and giving us your time. I wanted, Governor, to ask you if you could, at least right at the outset, frame the discussion for us in terms of some of the key points, issues and actions that will help economies, companies and people navigate these unprecedented times.
Thank you, Godfrey, and good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. Delighted to be part of this panel. I think the COVID crisis, pandemic, has really taught us that the old way we were looking at business resilience, which was more in line with business continuity planning procedures and all that, maybe more from a compliance perspective, that just doesn't work. The point is that we have had to look deep and figure out how are we going to continue serving our customers, and this is whichever institution you are CEO of. How do you want to continue serving your customers when the environment has changed? It is true in the past we were thinking of shelter-in-place sort of drills, etc., BCPs, but now actually the first thing we need to ask ourselves is what exactly is my comparative advantage? What product are we providing? And how can we continue providing that product going forward? Banks, for instance, in Kenya in particular, but elsewhere, have had to ask themselves that question because customers are no longer really coming into the brick and mortar institution buildings, but rather wanting service, which is really the same old service in a different format. By the way, we've seen that SMEs have been particularly adaptive in this environment. So when the music changes, they also changed the dance. So that is one thing I would want to mention. Then finally, the biggest point in this is that it is really all about people. It's less about systems and things like that. Those things we were pretty comfortable with, but really about human beings. And can we actually, in the medium term, make staff much more adaptable? So for instance, if you think of a bank, can you move a teller to become a customer service provider, etc.? So those are the issues, as it were, in terms of what we have learned and redefined business resilience.
Thank you very much, Governor. I wanted to follow up that by asking around the issue of how you plan for the long term when you are confronted by an immediate term crisis.
Okay. I think the first thing is to realize that you have to survive the short term. You have to survive the medium term before you get to the long term. But the long term is defined by your strength. So in all this, the thread that connects them all is what is your strength as an institution? And if you're thinking of even, say, a provider of services to customers or products to customers, what is really your distinguishing factor? And that is the one that you need to sort of build around in the medium term and into the long term. That's what will distinguish you. That is one thing. The other thing is, as I said, about people, having staff that are much more adaptable, that are not just, let's say, one skill. I mean, when you're talking to your HR department, are you thinking of, I need a set of people with these skills, IT skills or whatever it is? No. It has to be people that have certain skills today, beneficial to you, but that can change quickly. You can retrain them in a different role. And of course, having very clear vision, which is the role of, obviously, management and the board.
Absolutely. And on that journey, Governor, what kind of partners do you need?
Excellent. Actually, that's a very good question, because part of the resilience, the whole effort and thought around resilience, you need also to be clear who your partners are. And can they actually provide you with the services that they have been providing you when the music changes? That actually has been a key issue. For instance, most of the institutions that we deal with, banks, for instance, and even ourselves here as a central bank, COVID has made us look at and try and figure out who our key vendors are. So like tier one vendors, and what are the, let's say, risks that they have in terms of providing us with services on a timely basis. In the olden days, you used to have a service level agreement, but that probably doesn't mean much when there are significant changes in the environment. So you need to have also very adaptable, let's say, players. But as one understands, it has to be players or people, partners, basically, that have the same vision as yourself. And we, as a central bank, have had to deal with that. Coming up, understanding who our critical suppliers are, and indeed what would happen if they are not able to provide that whatever service that we are requesting from them at a particular time.
I'm reminded, Governor, of that African proverb which goes, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Let's move on to our other panelists for today. I want to call upon you, Andrew, your thoughts, your outlook in this environment where, in essence, everybody has had to reset and replan, because we can ask, I think, every one of the 8 or so billion people in the world, nobody saw this one coming.
No, that's absolutely right. And we can talk about how IT can help us with prediction. But, there's another thought I had there, Godfrey. For those of us in IT who have got careers and had careers in IT, the concept of resilience is actually a very familiar one to us. It's right up there with security. When we build IT systems, you think security and you think resilience. And that's meant that, as professionals, we've built concepts of redundancy in there. If some part is gone, how do you make up for it? We built in ideas for modularity. You can unplug something and plug an alternative in if there's failure. Diversity, maybe doing the same thing in different ways, which might again all give rise to resilience. I think IT and its concepts actually can be of good use when applied to the business as a whole. Look at the business in terms of concept. You might need redundancy, diversity, and modularity in the business. But I loved, Governor, your comment. And as a technologist and looking across the globe for technology, really at the heart of any resilient strategy is people. And that's where we must begin. If we don't have a resilient workforce, which means absolutely adaptability and resilience, there's no point in any other strategy. And technology can even help there. Zoom we're using just now to keep people together, remote training systems to help reskill people. Technology's got a wonderful way in which it can also support that core element of any resilient strategy, people.
And of course, Andrew, people do need to be trained. And we know that even before COVID struck, we were talking about the need for trained personnel, how people were going to be preparing for the fourth industrial revolution and all that. But in terms of making sure that those people are future ready, how do you go about that? Is this training that encompasses essentially what you're doing in your business, or are we talking about the partnerships that the governor referred to in his opening remarks?
Oh, it's through partnership, absolutely. And, I'm constantly, as an optimist, looking for silver linings to any cloud. And I think what we're seeing here, as the governor's described, that this is an adversity that we all face. The human race is facing this adversity. And I'm very pleased to see that we do see tighter partnerships, a willingness to understand each other's issues and where we can best help each other. And I think technology, obviously I'm biased from a technology company, but it is the infrastructure of the 21st century. And I think it's important for us as technology companies to share our views, share our visions, and that in turn will help us understand just exactly what we need in the way of training and skills in the future.
Yeah. Jibril, technology, of course, enables us to join you right now where you are in Abidjan, the commercial capital of the Ivory Coast. I want your opening thoughts as a mobile phone operator in terms of trying to prepare for this future that we don't know. So Andrew was speaking there about redundancies. I'm sure that's language that you very well understand.
Yes, for sure. But I have to say, no one was really prepared for this unprecedented crisis. For sure, as an ICT company, we were fully trying to be digital, but when it's happened, we needed to prepare internally our own people, to prepare our network as a carrier in order to continue delivering our promises to our customer. And then as a larger brand in Africa, we needed to ensure that we are building some partnership with the government in order to make a difference in our communities. The thing I would like to say is that resilience, I fully agree with my peers. Resilience is at first about people. We needed to make sure that our people were enough feeling well, their health was under control, and then we introduced work from home for all the staff, and we put in place a protocol that help us to test them and to trace their entire families. Yeah. And then, as I said, on the technology side, we did a lot of work, because we overnight we saw the traffic, the data traffic going up while the voice traffic was going down during the lockdown. Yeah. So we needed re-engineering our network know to align with actually the movement of the population, since the people who were working in downtown now were staying now home in the residential areas. So we did, and we had some challenges at the same time, challenges related to the global supply chain that was not working. So as a ICT company, I think we did well by building our network resilience in order to be able to meet actually the demands that was going on.
Absolutely. So it's people, it's technology, but it's also processes, isn't it, Carl? If I can come to you, and we are still learning, by the way. So your opening thoughts in terms of what you have seen and what's required to ensure that we geared ourselves properly for when the next crisis strikes.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that picking up from what my peer said, especially what the governor said, the most important one is the fact that it is people. You need to get people ready. You need to have the technology. But the key thing is that you need a strategy, and that's where the leadership comes in. So from the board of directors for any organization, actually thinking through, because here resilience goes beyond just the normal business continuity disaster recovery that we put in place. It is actually looking at the risk, so an element of risk management comes in here, where you want to actually understand all the risks that the business would potentially subjected to. So risk to supply chain, risk to the people, risk to your technology, and it goes on and on. Of course, it looks at efficiency, where you probably start looking at cost cutting. And research actually, from what we've seen, has showed that companies that actually started this long ago, even though they have a slump, are quicker to recover, and then they do much better than their peers. So they're ahead of the curve. So it is a pre-planned activity that businesses have to go through. And going around the country, because I've been doing some work with the banking college and looking at the banks, for instance, when the lockdown came, and we're using COVID as an example, we found out that institutions had actually prepared, so just like Andrew said, they had implemented a lot of technology solutions, and it was just a matter of activating these things. Of course, making sure that the people were able to work safely, and also be able to reach their customers. And so from a technology point of view, yes, this is actually one of the most important things. And companies did it by looking at, we call it many different terms, the digital transformation, digitalization. They had actually started that journey, but COVID actually accelerated it and then helped bring in place the concept of resilience, made it actually practicalized it for many businesses. And that's what we're seeing now.
Sure. So I've added another word to the three that I had at the beginning. So we said it's people, it's technology, and we can also add that it is planning and identification of risk, as well as a process, of course. Anik, if I can come to you, you operate in a region which we know, number one, is vast, and we also know that it's got many challenges. So we speak about identifying risk, but we're also talking capacity. We're also talking a lack of skills from your side. Key learnings to date, Anik.
Free. E-learning, indeed, I will just reemphasize what my peer have said about companies being focused on their people and making sure that the people will be safe. As much as in the beginning, this whole pandemic was perceived as a situation where companies had to find short-term solutions. There is a paradigm shift, because more leaders, business leaders, have realized that it's not only a matter of putting in place the right strategy to be able to face the pandemic right now, but it's more of a long-term focus that they have to put, so that the transformation they are currently operating with all the adjustments that they have made to be able to face the pandemic is something that they can put in place for the long term, to make sure that all the investment they're making now, when the situation is so tense, when revenue is so low, can be something that will maximize ROI on the long term.
Absolutely. And this is a question that I'm going to pose to everybody else, Anik, but I want to stay with you and get your thoughts on the role of data in this planning that we're talking about, in building these strategies that we are talking about.
Absolutely, Godfrey. And now we have realized that data is at the center because companies realize that they have this massive amount of data available within the organization. And they want now to leverage this data to be able to make the best decision for the business so that they can have the best way to know what the next step will be. And coming to Oracle, which is by nature a data company, we have seen that our customers have reached out to us based on the solution they're already having and using from Oracle to know if we could help them have better insight. And this is where we can leverage all the new technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, to help our customer really see inside what they have at the moment and readjust their strategy so that they can be resilient in these times.
Yeah. Let me go to the governor. Governor, your thoughts on this data issue, because you are a collector of data by nature because of the function of your office and your organization. To what extent have you been able to use this data, and are you getting enough data? In any case, I am sure Jibril will be very happy to supply this data, and Oracle as well.
Thank you, Godfrey. Thank you very much. The issue of data is key. Frankly, there was a general who was asked, how do you win wars? What are the three most important things? And he said, information, information, information.
Sure.
So when we look into how are we going to get out of this or how are we going to go forward, information which is redefined as data is key. For instance, you need information as a CEO about your own staff. You know, who is ready to take on what position? So, for instance, during this COVID period, let's say 3 of your staff members, key staff members, did not show up the next morning because, well, they got afflicted by this disease. How are you going to choose who are the 2 or 3 that can substitute them and in what way? It's data. It's not just going down the list. It's knowing what skills and so forth. So the whole business of HR, it goes under other names, is really now an issue also. Data is key in making those decisions. And that is, I guess, when you talk about data, you think about bank data, financial data, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But I think you need to begin with data that are, let's say, bigger or meta in a sense. Other data have also been very useful in terms of appreciating what is your strong point, who comes in and the footfall into, into your, let's say, stores, et cetera, et cetera. This has been key. Without data, I think you're going nowhere. But again, it is important to understand how to tease out the solutions from data. And that's where all these new technologies are probably useful. But let's be clear, technologies, we should not be slaves of technology. Yeah. We should actually be asking the questions that data answers.
Absolutely. Which is where Oracle comes in, isn't it? Because they are data collectors. So, Andrew, your thoughts on using that data, but also we know, of course, there are other issues that come into play when we begin to talk about data and how you guys and all these people who are in this space collect our data and what they end up using it for.
Well, I think the governor just put it absolutely beautifully. Information is key, and in some ways, aren't we rediscovering in many ways what our forebears and our ancestors knew? They used their eyes and their ears and perhaps notepads, but they were successful in adding value to those around them by looking, listening, and learning, and then deciding cleverly what to do as a result of that. We're really doing exactly the same, but now we have more than our eyes and our ears. We have the possibility of collecting information from sensors within our electric engines, from sensors within our buildings and so on, which allows us to collect much more information. Efficiency is not synonymous with resilience. There's more to resilience than being efficient. But I would say it's very difficult to be resilient if you're being wasteful. So clearly it's part of it. Now, what I'm seeing perhaps the most successful organizations do is exactly as the governor said. They're asking their data. They're not slaves to the data. They're asking for what they need. And in particular, what I see the most successful organizations doing
Yeah.
is using their data to predict slightly more accuracy, not necessarily something as big as a pandemic, but to predict who might be the better employee, which product is likely to be more successful, which building might be the more cost-effective one to run. And the more historical data you have, the more likely you're able to predict. We're seeing retailers actually dispatching goods before the customers order them, very efficient, because they're so accurate predicting. In my own Scottish National Health Service, we're using collected data to detect patterns of fraudulent behavior.
Sure.
The last thing we need now in a pandemic is our health service to be misused. We're detecting patterns in the data by using analytical tools. The more data, the better we can see just a little bit further into the future, and a little bit more outlying patterns. Drives efficiency, helps resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get our communications people in. Jibril and Carl, I want your thoughts on how you use this data, because you are the collectors, aren't you? Can I start with you, Jibril, and we bring in Carl?
Yeah, Godfrey. I will use the example of how we manage our distribution network with an intelligence tools that combine geographical information, network KPIs, aggregated customer behavior information, and stock availability. We use that to guide our sales team on a real-time basis so that they can track more than 100 KPIs metrics to make important decisions and increase our sales performance and combat fraud. But this tool became even more important during the pandemic because the sales team could not visit the POS, the point of sale, and even due to the lockdown restriction, POS could not all go out to sell their product. So we had to rely more on such tools, and different area in our business was were impacted. Data-driven decision making, I would say, machine learning and artificial intelligence will probably continue becoming more important in the post-COVID area. This tool has been very helpful even for the government. We supported the government through our engine room application to facilitate contact tracing and to help them to contain the propagation of the virus. Key benefits for this tool were probably monitoring the mobility, monitoring actually the population movement as well. And I think this is really an example of using powerfully data to help businesses, but also to help the government.
Absolutely. Because what we also saw, I don't know in the other parts of the continent and the world you guys are way in, what we saw is with the lockdowns, we saw, of course, a surge in data usage, but at the same time, we also began talking about capacity constraints. So I'm hoping that those lessons would have coming into the fore as we say we are trying now to build businesses for the future. Carl, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I'm just going to pick up from where Jibril ended, and I'm using an example from GCNet, something that we were doing with the government, where we provided a solution for the, a surveillance monitoring solution for helping track the diseases, so outbreaks. And that's what we're using for COVID. And so it was started on a pilot basis for 2 regions. And invariably, we saw the power of the tool, and that's what is being used countrywide. And now, to the extent that the Ghana Health Service actually mines the data, and they're able to use it to keep track of what is happening in each of the hospitals. They know the beds, they know the condition of each patient, and so they're able to do the planning effectively. And that's one of the reasons why the government was able to open up the airports to allow passengers to come into the country. And so to the extent that you come into the airport and you're able to do a rapid test, and within 30 minutes you're out of the airport, simply because they are able to collect data and to be able to do the track and trace and to allow the business to go on. Otherwise you bring the economy to a halt. That is just one of the examples. And so data in various sectors actually plays a very big role in the way where companies or organizations or nations actually respond to crisis. It helps bring about resilience. And so if without this type of data, clearly you could imagine what's going to happen. The economy will still struggle because you'll not be able to open up, you'll not be able to track people, and it's going to create a problem. So we cannot underestimate the power of data that we collect.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned the economy, I want to bring the governor into the conversation here and talk about managing monetary policy post the COVID crisis. But I need Anik to come in a little bit as well and talk about the role of leadership in this environment. So when I was preparing for this debate, I came across some writings from Fortune magazine. I'm sure most of you would know Fortune magazine and how they cover the tech issues. And one of the issues that they raise in there is the kind of leadership that you want in this kind of an environment. And I'm sure all of you in your leadership positions would have had time to consider this one. So Anik, I'm beginning with you. Then we go to the governor, because of course when he makes monetary policies, not just making for his customers, we are all his customers. But Anik first.
Thank you, Godfrey. Thank you, Governor. Yes, and this whole situation has proven that leadership is key here in making the decision, whereas where to go next. And we have seen that leaders are becoming more and more involved into the decision they are taking. Adopting technology is something key. We could see that the companies that were already prepared, that had already put in place the technology block to start the digital transformation, were able to adjust more promptly than those who have, so to say, been procrastinating in the past. But this is where the difference comes from, the leaders. Because back in the days, they were waiting for CIOs to make the strategy. We see that they have the overall view across the company, and they are now in a better position to drive and to lead the companies into making the right decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. Moving quickly, there's a word I've been trying to avoid throughout: agility and pivot. We've heard this word often enough, and adapting to the new normal. We're all trying to run away from it. But Governor, from your perspective, you had to have agility, didn't you? You have to move very quickly to adapt to the situation that was unfolding before you. Share some lessons from your perspective that you picked up as you tried to make sure that the economy stayed afloat and steady as the crisis hit.
Thank you very much. I think the catchword or byword in all this is actually agility. So when we started off, meaning when actually at the beginning of the year, we monitored what was going on around the world. And by the time the first COVID positive person in Kenya, or somebody showed up here who was positive, we were already concerned that we're already looking at scenarios where actually the virus would be more widespread. So once that happened, we were able to move quite quickly because we had thought a bit about it. Obviously, the priority then was to make sure that the health crisis does not become an economic crisis. So, and that meant, for instance, using the digital systems that we had, etc., leading with our strength. So that's one thing. But going forward, of course, we and central banks around the world have really come out strongly to support the economy. And that is one of their strengths. They were able to move much more quickly than, say, the fiscal authorities, etc. But going ahead, obviously, we know that this crisis has broken a lot of supply chains, etc. And therefore, there'll be a lot of reforms that are needed to put us back, or as we are saying, build back better. And that, I think, the central banks will need to sort of let's say, take a back seat and maybe have a supporting role and not so much a lead role as they allow the other authorities to continue. It is a difficult thing, but we are happy that we've avoided some of the major, let's say, declines that we have seen in many other countries.
Absolutely. And the lessons are continuing, of course, Governor, without question, because we are still seeing impacts coming through that have not been anticipated. Shortly, we will open the discussion for questions from people who are watching our web broadcast today. But before we do that, I wanted to explore this issue of leadership. Andrew, do we require a new type of leader in this environment? One of the suggestions I've seen is that perhaps the kind of leader that you need is more a risk taker, and you need to be encouraging that kind of person in this environment.
I think we'll always have room for leadership of different types of risk taking. That's the way, as I'm sure the governor knows, we function as a marketplace. Everybody's got a different perception of risk is how it all works. I think that certainly something I've seen is leaders who are, first and foremost, go back to the start of our conversation, who understand the importance of people within their businesses is absolutely key. Anik mentioned also leadership, understanding the actual processes within the organization. If you're going to be resilient, you're going to need to be able to change processes rapidly. You've got to understand these processes and able to do so to make these decisions. So as always, the devil is in the detail. I'm obliged, again, as a technologist, to make a technology point. I see the route towards sustainability as a business, the route towards competitive advantage, the route towards increased value add to the society around us, coming to a greater and greater extent through digital technology and leadership. I've seen, certainly during my career, a huge increase in the awareness and the knowledge and the understanding of the importance of digital technology and how that can result in sustainable, competitive and successful businesses in the private sector, and of course effective governance in the public sector as well. So I'm going to argue that leaders of the future, they're going to be able to build in that resiliency into their organizations. A key element of that is going to be this concept of modularity, this concept of diversity of solution, and within that is the understanding of technology and what that can bring. And I think we will all benefit from that in the years to come.
Yeah. Carl, Jibril, I want your thoughts on the kind of leader that COVID-19 demands, the post-COVID world. But at the same time, I also want to say I'm going to begin taking in some questions. So, Carl, come in.
Yes, I think that on the leadership thing that we talked about, and Andrew made the point, leaders are supposed to be able to, I wouldn't use the word soothsayers, but you should be able to have a good prediction of what the trends are. Yes. But then for you to be able to do that, you need to have a good understanding of your environment. You need to understand your customer. And you actually need to understand your business, your processes, your products. How inelastic or elastic are they? Okay, so I'm just trying to borrow some of the governance terms, the economists like those ones. But then the important thing is technology. We're doing some training for the board of all the banks in Ghana. And one of the things we're trying to do is to bring it to the doorstep of the directors, for them to understand that for the institutions to go forward, in this particular trying times and the way the world is changing, directors would have to be very involved. From the get-go, you need to understand what technology can do for you and understand how it impacts the customers. And I've seen many different examples, right from the very small side, because of what I said from ISACA's point of view, all the way through to large enterprises. And I've seen restaurants suddenly resort to technology to deliver food to their customers, simply because the customers will not be able to walk in. And they're doing well. They're actually doing much better than they're doing now. And so these are things that leaders actually need to be able to harness it. It's no longer an operational thing. It is actually a strategic imperative for the heads of organizations to embrace this type of thing and get to understand their businesses and understand their customers.
Yeah. Jibril, if this one trips you up, you must blame Carl. But I just wanted to know, from what he is saying, can data make you a better soothsayer, a sort of better fortune teller?
For my industry, for sure, data can help me to be more successful. My industry is based on processing data, processing whole history. So I need, if I have a better data center, I can for sure process all the interaction I'm having with the customer, in order to provide a better service for them and in order to be more successful. But coming back to the leadership question, if
Yes.
I may add something, I strongly believe that what we can learn from this crisis is first, we need to have a better management of the crisis, to be able to proactively learn about what's happening. And then we need to act without having enough data. We need to act and learn from our action because we don't have enough evidence of what is happening elsewhere. Within MTN, this is exactly what we did. Actually, we were supposed to have our annual gathering in Abidjan early in February, but we decided to cancel it because we realized that most of the attendees will be going through Dubai Airport, Nairobi Airport, and also Addis Ababa Airport. And all these airports are actually up for for people who are traveling from China to Africa. So we decided to cancel. We did not know yet what will happen in the future. And I have to say that this decision-making process without having enough evidence is quite critical for the future. And we learn a lot from that.
Absolutely, you build resilience through using the data, and I guess you can go back to what I think we have all been talking about, which is that you use your history, of course, to better anticipate the future. So data builds up that history. At this point, let's open up the debate to our panelists, and I've got a question here for Andrew. Here goes, Andrew. When you collect so much personal data used for predicting, how do you ensure that there are no ethical issues?
Great question. So yeah, I first of all will agree with all that's been said just now. We can use data to predict. It's not soothsaying. Very often what happens in life is there are leading indicators before an event takes place. We used to think volcanoes happen spontaneously. No, things happen before that. And if you're sensitive enough, you can measure the gases, you can measure the movement, you effectively predict what you thought was an unpredictable event. And the same thing can happen throughout our organizations. There are often leading indicators, patterns that we can see from history, which will give rise to better predictability and therefore less wasted effort, greater efficiency. It's a super way forward for us in using data in our organizations. And yes, the collection of that personal information will inevitably involve some very serious ethical questions for all of us as citizens of our various countries. They'll be dealt with in the way that the human race deals with ethical issues, which is through our sovereign structures. So sitting as I do in a global organization, I see different reactions in different countries. There are different sovereign legal structures to look after information and data. And we try and accommodate that by making sure that, for example, data can stay within the same jurisdiction, for example. I would, as a technologist, make the point that it's not, the ethics are absolutely one thing our society must decide upon and how we police that. But above all, there's a security element as well. The ethics are one thing, but if we don't keep this ever-increasing volume of data very, very highly secure, we're in real trouble. Not only is it our data, often we as organizations, speaking as a whole here, will be looking after other people's information, and that's a heightened responsibility, making security right up there alongside resilience, as I said at the opening.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. This one goes to the governor. Can we form a big data community to formulate economic efficiency, and I guess you could say monetary policy efficiency models, as a key takeaway from today's session?
Thank you. I guess I don't think the issue is geography, frankly. Data can be wherever it is. I think we all understand this issue now about cloud computing. It's not necessary for me to even know where the data is. Frankly, when you make a transaction with your credit card, where that data resides, you actually don't even know. But there's a rule somewhere, and you can actually locate it. So I don't think the issue for me would be to bring data in one geographical location I think what we need to do is to be clear about access, rules of access, and what you do with the data. So I think data is extremely important, personal data and all other data. And there is ownership. The mere fact that, let's say, you are, you have a, let's say, a system, a computer that has some data, that shouldn't give you a right to using or even maybe trying to figure out, connecting the dots in that whole arrangement. So I think what we need to do is be clear about the rules, be clear about the ownership, and then allow people to use it as constrained by that. But Godfrey, there's one thing I wanted to mention now that I have the floor about leadership. I know this is, others have weighed in on this. I actually think that the issue of leadership is so very important, particularly, given where we are in this conjuncture. But to me, leaders we need is not so much risk, more risk takers and things like that. I think those are okay. I'm more concerned about vision. Leaders distinguish themselves with vision. They are the carriers of the fire in terms of each institution or country or whatever else it is. They don't need to be the best programmers. They don't need to be the best, slicing and dicing some sort of financial arrangement, whatever it is. But they necessarily need to be the carriers of the fire, and we will walk behind them. So it is the vision that matters. And the other ones that need to walk with us, ahead of us, as we go through these unprecedented times.
One more question for you, Governor, and thank you for that answer and weighing in on the leadership issue. The question goes, central banks are enablers as well as regulators in the DFS ecosystem. What can the Governor tell us regarding capacity building, reducing timelines for licensing, and interoperability issues?
Thank you. So it is true we are regulators, but also there are these other, let's say, mandates that we have to achieve. In terms of licensing, I think the issues here with a lot of the, let's say, the institutions that want licenses, unfortunately, we have seen that a lot of them are not fully aware about the rules of engagement, meaning they are just showing up and sort of like a bus, I want to go from here to there, I want to buy my ticket, why shouldn't I get the ticket right away? There's a whole business of understanding who is the player, understanding what the product is, understanding the risks, etc. Those are, if indeed the institution concerned or the promoters are clear about that and they can explain it, then there's no reason of holding back. But frankly, particularly in the financial sector or the payments area, etc., the risks are huge, just like doctors. When you are, doctors take time to be doctors, and I think before they get licensed, they have to go through all sorts of exams because the risks are high. So I think the issue here isn't so much that there's a set timeline. There are certain hurdles that they have to jump or to go through, and if those can be done quickly, then the licenses can be and the approvals can be done on an expeditious way.
Sure. So, thank you, Governor. Now, telecommunications companies, of course, are integral in our daily lives. Try just going through the day without your phone or perhaps without sitting by a computer, and you feel like the world has passed you by. I want to come back to the issue of data collection by the telecommunications companies. Jibril, Carl, do you want to come in and weigh in on this one?
Well, I think that, yes, indeed, we can't do anything without data. We can't do anything without telcos. But then the thing about the data collection, yes, collection has to happen, but it has to happen within a certain framework. And I think that the different jurisdictions have different acts that guide how the data is collected, how the data is processed, and how the data is given out. And so in Ghana, for instance, we have the act that guides the telcos on what they can do. And even states cannot get access to the data without the requisite procedures. And this is important to safeguard the personally identified information of customers. You know, it is a big thing, and it's one of those things which the telcos cannot get it wrong. We all can get it wrong, because as citizens, we need to ensure that our data is well protected, because it has many implications. And now this brings us to the larger question of the whole data protection issues. And that's why you find different jurisdictions coming up with data protection laws, because they realize that if you get access to my phone number, which I probably use for my bank and I use for my health information and so forth, then clearly you've actually really exposed everything about me. And so protecting this data is very important. It doesn't mean that we've gotten it right all out. You know, there's a lot of work to be done. It's more the awareness we need to do.
You need to build. You need data in order to build resilience, and for you to be able to collect that data, you need to make sure that I can trust you. Jibril, quickly your thoughts. We have got the minister from Senegal who wants to come in and weigh in on our discussion.
My comment on data is that we need to be careful, because to me, data is the heart of what we can call today the fourth industrial revolution. So if we are protecting too much access to data and how people or companies should use data in order to ease the life of our customers, I think if we are not doing that right, we'll stop the progress. We are collecting data. We need good regulation to protect the privacy of a personal data, but we need to realize that this is really what will drive the progress and what will drive actually the fourth industrial revolution.
Jibril, point very well made. And you know, when you have so much fun and you also have a lot of information, hello, data crunchers, you need to crunch this data and make sure you come up with key learnings for us here. Time just flies. And it only remains for me to ask the governor to give us his closing thoughts and summary for everybody. Governor, if I can come to you.
Thank you very much, Godfrey and panelists. I think this has been an interesting discussion. I'm particularly excited that there has been many learning points on resilience, which is probably not a word that you hear often in Africa, but I think that is extremely important. The issue of data is key, as was mentioned, but I think also here I wanted to add that big tech is a big concern, meaning the disproportionate powers around data. But that is something that obviously a lot of us are already thinking about. But I think finally, really my issue about people. It is true that we have learned that the hard way, that the most important resource is really your people. And are they aligned to what you're doing, etc. And I guess when now we look forward into the post-COVID period, that will really be something that we'll have to look at again slowly, because the whole business of the future workplace and the way we do business in the future will really be redefined in a particular way. But I'm very excited about the various things that you put out here, including obviously IT's role in all this, because there are learning points that we can take forward. And thank you again for having us on this panel.
Governor, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. That's Governor Patrick Njoroge, Central Bank of Kenya. I also want to thank, of course, Anik Sako, Regional Director, Oracle West Africa, Jibril Ouattara, Chief Executive Officer, MTN Cote d'Ivoire, Carl Saki, Deputy General Manager, GCNet, and President Isaka, and last but not least, Andrew Sutherland, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Oracle. Thank you all for your time. I'm taking away data, people, planning, process, and all these things building to the topic that we were discussing today, business resilience in uncertain times. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.